Police toting automatic weapons and lobbing flash grenades, storming a Sydney cafe early Tuesday, bringing to a dramatic end a 16-hour standoff in which Manharoon Monis, a jihadist and a murder suspect, held an unknown number of hostages. Joining us now to talk about the latest developments, James Carafano, Vice President of the Heritage Foundation, David Adesnik, Fellow with the Foreign Policy Initiative. Gentlemen, welcome. James, let me start with you. What's your reaction to this?
Look, these kind of things can happen anywhere at any time. We ought to put this in context. I mean, we know that Australia, and this may not say anything about the Australia terrorist threat, but we know Australia is a terrorist target. I mean, we know that for a fact. They raised the terrorist alert level. They've been with us in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've had Australians go to the foreign fighter pipeline to fight for ISIS. And even if simple things, if you go to the Australian Embassy website here in the United States, you'll find a lot of information that was there a couple of months ago. So identifying specific people and individuals, they've taken some of stuff off their website. So regardless of what happened here and how this plays out, Australia is, and will continue to be worried about a transnational terrorist threat.
The ISIS spokesman, David, has been urging through media messages lone wolf attacks on people abroad, especially in Australia. Might there be a connection here?
I think it's possible. We don't know a lot yet about Mr. Monis. His black flag is reminiscent of jihadi flags, but it's not actually the ISIS flag, so there's not a direct connection. But it's hard with a single individual who may not have been able to get a hold of precisely the one he wanted and went ahead regardless. I think the more disturbing question is if there's any direct operational link. That's one of the big questions. We know there can be lone wolves, whether it's Nidal Malik Hassan in the United States, whether what we saw in Canada with 2 attacks recently. But the much more disconcerting thing would be if there were a direct connection between those fighting in the Middle East returning and plotting together to attack civilians in the West or Australia, as the case may be.
Yeah. James, it could also be that this is simply a guy who is utterly unhinged. Police are quite familiar with him. He was charged in the murder of his wife, but out on bail, charged with sexual assault. He's been undertaking a writing campaign to fallen Australian soldiers' families, making incredibly disparaging remarks, calling them killers and so forth. So there might be that aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is nothing new. I mean, there's always been kind of a spectrum between organized terrorist groups and people on the far end are just crazy. I mean, if you just look in the United States, for example, we have everything from the Major Hassan lone wolf attack at Fort Hood, which we all clearly believe, and by every definition ought to be categorized as a classic terrorist attack, just one step removed from actually coordinating the operation specifically with Al-Qaeda Central, to something like the more recent terrorist attack in New York, where the guy took an axe to some cops. That's probably there. Then you look at something like happened in Oklahoma with the guy that beheaded some of his coworkers. That's a little more on the borderline crazy thing. I think you're always going to see this spectrum of activity get over that. But the one thing that we are seeing, and which is very interesting, we ought to watch very closely, is regardless of who does this and why, look at the ISIS propaganda machine. They always try to leverage that. They try to leverage the CIA report. You watch, they'll try and leverage and claim responsibility, or at least they'll applaud this attack. So you're going to always see, anytime a bad thing happens, that somehow ISIS can say they're the spirit behind that, they're going to want to claim credit for that.
Yeah, and David, mentally and unstable people are often attracted to this sort of things. The ex-attorney for the suspect said this: his ideology is so strong, so powerful, it clouds his vision for common sense and objectiveness. He might have put his finger on it, David.
I agree, although I think it's important to distinguish between mental illness and extreme commitment to an ideology. That, their actions just seem so violent and offensive to the vast majority who see them. I think it's important to distinguish that mentally ill people may not be able to control or plan well, but extreme ideologues often have that ability, whether they're running a state like Stalin or Hitler, or whether they're terrorist organizers like Osama bin Laden. Their behavior is just as extreme, but they're much more in control and therefore much more dangerous.
Well said. David Adesnik, James Carafano, gentlemen, good to see you both. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
And for more on this developing story, stay with FoxNews.com. I'm Greg Jarrett. Thanks for watching.